Found a guy on YouTube that had leaks on his exhaust manifold, and he poured soapy water over them. The engine's cold, and then you freshly start it and pour it on. And I just did that, and now I'm going to put it on camera because I think the results are outstanding. I'll be right back. It's going to be noisy, there's wind, and the engine's going to be noisy, but this is certainly a visual experience. Alright, here goes the fuel pressure test. Alright, so my other gauge read between 4 and 6, and this one's a little more on the low side. But these first gens, the lift pump pressure is right around 5 psi. So you have to, have a gauge that's accurate in that range, and this one really isn't super accurate. But at least it shows the concept. It has around, 3-4 psi on this gauge and 5 on another gauge. So that just goes to show you the test you need to make for the fuel pressure. Alright, here we are. The rest of the troubleshooting came down to this. You could tell from the huge bubbles coming out from under this V-band clamp that the leak was obviously here. So I had to reef down on this nut 2 or 3 different times, and one of those times was after everything was all warmed up. It loosened its clamping force, so I had to tighten it down some more. And I finally got it to the point where it quit leaking. I pour the soapy water all over this thing and it doesn't leak a drop anymore. You probably saw there was a slight leak right here, and that's in that gasket space right there, and one on the front exhaust manifold. So they were tiny. They're not going to make up the difference between 13 psi and 8 or 9 psi. So what you may notice, some of you probably haven't seen this before. This is a BD, what do they call it, a Jake brake. And it was on here when I bought the truck 10 years ago. What happened was, unbeknownst to me, is the lever, since all these hoses are broken and disconnected and stuff, they're all hardened and bad, this thing was about 90% closed. So this is the fully open position. It came down like this, and it was that way for most of the last 10 years. And so I was standing here with it one day, and I started it up, and I shoved it the last 10%, and a lot of noise came out of the air filter, like you'd think a Jake brake would do when you close off the exhaust. So I realized it'd been in the wrong position and probably floating open slightly. And you know, functioning okay, but you know, there was always some overheating. So now, as a test, I took and baling wired this thing wide open, and it runs a lot better. There's a lot more horsepower, and guess what? I got my 13 PSI back. So that is very cool. I'm happy for that. But the downside is, if you haven't put it together, then had I found this first, I would have never done the head gasket. Yeah, so the head gasket was sort of a complete waste. What I could take away from it is this. This Jake brake had been backing up the carbon deposits in the head for the 10 years that I had it, God knows how long before. And so there was a lot of carbon buildup. The rear valves, there was carbon under the seats. And that, I cleaned all that out and there's a kind of a back cut around the valves. And you saw in some previous videos that I cleaned all that carbon out too. So that was good. And then I put brand new valve stem seals from Felpro, Viton valve stem seals on all the valves. So I had the opportunity to take all the valves out, inspect for cracks, and there were none, and put it all back together with new valve stem seals. So those are some good things. That was a positive step. It was a lot of work. It took 45 days of my life. So, but okay, it's done. And now the main cause has been found. I did a speed run the other day up this long, steep hill out of Bullhead coming towards Kingman, and it's got to be 15 miles long, and it's pretty steep. It goes from 500 to 3,500 feet, and this thing only overheated one notch on the gauge, and that was at full throttle and 70 miles an hour the entire time. So that's a huge improvement. I don't know if that's where it's supposed to be, but I like it. So we'll see how things go here in the future. One of these days I want to take my RV out and tow it around and maybe go down to Quartzsite or something. And that's a good test run too. So will I ever fix this Jake brake linkage and stuff? Nah. The only reason it's still on here is because apparently back in the day this thing was $1,000. Yeah, it's from BD. Yeah, so it was $1,000, so I just left it on here. And it'll stay out of the way now, and that baling wire will last an awful long time. Maybe someday when I'm super bored, I'll take the exhaust manifold apart and put all new gaskets in. It's leaking slightly in a couple places, but yeah, who cares? It's not making any difference in the boost. Plus, all these rubber boots have been replaced, and now there's no more leakage at those at all, and there was lots of little leaks. I still have another small one to fix over on the intake horn, but it got me my pressure back, and between that and the other benefit was to change the throttle linkage, update it so it's 100% solid with no flex in it. This thing is just way more responsive. Just daily driving it around town, it's just really a joy. So this should be the last video for this series of head gasket and the subsequent troubleshooting that I had to do to find out that, yeah, it was all my fault. Oh, jeez. So everything's done. I finally got the valve lash done. I found the proper top dead center, redid that yesterday, and you'll see the nut here and the washer that holds on the decorative cover. That flat washer fell off the engine yesterday off the back, and so I need to find another flat washer and then put the decorative cover in, and we'll call this done. I see that the transmission fluid started leaking again, so I got to get under here and deal with that. But as for the head gasket, it's pretty much the same as everything else, except the head weighs a lot. You need an engine hoist to get it off. The turbo's working okay. It wouldn't be bad if it had a Gen 2 turbo in it, with a wastegate and a little more boost, but I'm not looking for performance. I want gas mileage. At sea level, I got 26 miles of the gallon out of this thing. and I want that back. So we're at 3,500 feet. I don't know if I'll get it back because of the altitude, but I'll start testing it here and see what I find, especially since we know the exhaust is wide open. Not only did I fix the gate here, the gate valve for the Jake brake, there was a slip joint down under the truck about 4 feet, and it was leaking like a sieve, so I put one of those real expensive stainless clamps on it that you torque to 60 foot-pounds. So all the leaks are gone. All the major leaks are gone. So the website I found, the guy said you had to have good airflow, good fuel flow, good exhaust flow, all three, before you condemn, say, the turbo or whatever. And that's exactly how it worked out. I had a huge exhaust restriction. So the old girl starts and runs like a charm. You saw that I tested the fuel pressure. It's about where it's supposed to be. The second gens have a, gosh, I don't know, 20, 25 PSI. And the first gens are around 5. So it's something good if you haven't ever checked it on your vehicle is to do that. It's not, you know, you can make an adapter like this bolt here I drilled out, or find one. This is 6 millimeters, and you just need to be able to hook a piece of hose to it. The reason it turns out that I use this wire on here was so that it'll, as you spin it in, it won't bang on the dipstick tube. If you put a clamp on there, a hose clamp, it'll bang on this horribly. Very little clearance. So this makes it spin in nice. It's a good setup. It's a good test rig. These gauges aren't super accurate. The gauge that I have now in the on the dash for the pressure is got an adjustable 0. So these have a stop, which means they're not accurate. If you adjust it to 0 exactly, then everything above that is more accurate. So it's actually part of a calibration thing if you've ever done calibration work. Anyway, so we're done here. I'll stick on the, as soon as I find a flat washer, probably metric, I'll put on the decorative cover, and this old girl's done. Thanks, see you, bye.